Good morning. So you are in dilemma whether to stand or be seated comfortably. Yes? Please sit down. So this will be a session on gross anatomy, radioulnar joints, wrist joint and first carpometacarpal joint. So what are the headings under which you usually describe any joint? Yes? The first heading is type of joint, then bones forming the joint, ligaments, capsule will be part of ligament, then before that, okay, bursae if any, related to that joint, and relations, structures related to that particular joint, movements, muscles producing movements, then nerve supply, blood supply, and lastly, yes, applied anatomy. Okay. So usually we follow these headings for describing any joint. But if you see radioulnar joint, you won't find all of the headings for radioulnar joint. But why it is important to study radioulnar joint? Because if you see competencies listed for these joints, yes, here they mention about identify, describe the type, articular surfaces, capsule, synovial membrane, ligaments, relations, movements, and of course the muscles producing movements, blood supply, nerve supply of elbow joint, proximal and distal radioulnar joints, wrist joint, and first carpometacarpal joint. So from upper limb, usually the shoulder joint, the elbow joint and wrist joint, these are the topics for LAQ, and all other topics are usually asked as SAQs. Okay. So you have already covered shoulder joint, right? And elbow joint also. No? Only shoulder joint? No? Demonstration? Elbow हुआ ही नहीं है. अच्छा. Okay, so you can read elbow joint also. So we'll start with radioulnar joint. So there are how many radioulnar joints? So can you name them? Superior, middle and inferior radioulnar joint. Okay. Similarly, if you compare it with lower limb, so which joints are comparable? Tibiofibular joints. So they are also superior, middle and inferior, right? Okay. So there are three radioulnar joints, superior, middle and inferior. Superior is pivot type of synovial joint. Middle radioulnar joint is fibrous. What type of fibrous? Again, you have classification in fibrous type of joints. Syndesmosis. Yes, correct. Syndesmosis. And inferior is again pivot type of synovial joints. So, radioulnar joints consist of superior, middle and inferior. Superior and inferior are pivot type of synovial joints, whereas middle one is fibrous, the syndesmosis. Okay. So, here you can see in this book picture, this is radius, this is ulna, and here is the area which depicts the superior radioulnar joint. This is inferior radioulnar joint, and in between here you can see the middle radioulnar joint is depicted by means of interosseous membrane, and there is one more thing which is called as oblique cord. We'll see what is oblique cord is. So how is the articulation taking place? We'll see one by one for superior and inferior radioulnar joint. Okay, so here you can see this is superior radioulnar joint seen from above. So can anyone tell me what are the bones forming the superior radioulnar joint? Head of radius and today you will be learning about radius and ulna in demonstration, but if you have any idea about the other articulating surface, you can tell. Otherwise, we'll discuss. So head of radius is one thing, and there is radial notch of the ulna, which is located near the olecranon and the coronoid process. Okay. So these two structures are forming the joint in the upper part. Similarly, in the lower part, here you can see the head of ulna is located inferiorly. Head of radius is located superiorly, whereas head of ulna is located inferiorly. And here we have seen there is radial notch on ulna, whereas in the lower part there will be ulnar notch for the head of ulna on the radius. So radius will present ulnar notch in the lower part, and in the upper part ulna will present radial notch for articulation with the head of radius. So superior radio-ulnar joint, can anyone repeat what type of joint it is? Pivot type of synovial joint, yes. So if you see the articulation between these two, the head of radius, which is cup shaped, so it has depressed upper surface and a rim of bone surrounding this broadened area at its upper end. Okay, so that forms or that constitutes what is called as head of radius. And if you see the other articular surface here, so this is the radial notch of the ulna. So it is basically osteofibrous ring which accommodates the head of radius. It is not only bony, it is not entirely osseous, it is osteofibrous. So why it is osteofibrous? Until and unless you have this fibrous component, your joint is not complete. So if you place only head of radius with the radial notch of ulna, it is incomplete without its ligament. So this ligament is very important, that forms this osteofibrous ring. So if you see, this is the bony part and this is the fibrous part of this articulation. And what is the name of this ligament? Annular ligament. So you have to remember this ligament. Annular ligament is the important ligament of the superior radio-ulnar joint. So if you see the bony, this osteofibrous articulation of the head of radius, it is 1/5 bony and 4/5 fibrous. Okay, 1/5 bony is this part, the radial notch of ulna, and 4/5 is made up of annular ligament. Okay, so osteofibrous ring, 1/5 is bony, 4/5 is fibrous. So this is the articular surface which is related to ulna in the form of a ligament and a bony notch. And the other articulating surface is head of radius. So here you can see head of radius, how it is located at its superior end. This is the peripheral rim and this is the depressed or concave superior surface of the head of radius, which articulates with the capitulum of humerus to form humeroradial component of the elbow joint. What type of joint it is? Elbow joint is hinge joint. It has two components, humeroradial and humeroulnar. So what about humeroradial component? So can you see articulating surfaces, how they are present? There is one ball and there is one socket. So it is modified ball and socket type of synovial joint, which is component of elbow joint. So when you talk about the elbow joint as one entity, it is hinge variety of synovial joint, but it has two components. One is humeroulnar and second is humororadial. Okay. So this is for articulation with the capitulum, and this area will be related to this. The entire peripheral rim will be related to osteofibrous ring of the joint. So this is how the specimen looks like. So here you can see the ulna upper end, which presents olecranon process. This is the coronoid process of ulna, and this is the radial notch which is present along lateral part of the upper end of the ulna, and it gives attachment to this ligament, annular ligament. So this annular ligament along with radial notch, it is completing this osteofibrous ring. Okay. So if you see continuity of this annular ligament, it will blend with capsule of elbow joint. Also, it will blend with which ligament is present laterally along elbow joint? There are two ligaments which are important as you can say thickening of the capsule of elbow joint laterally and medially. Laterally there is radial collateral ligament and medially there is ulnar collateral ligament. So as this joint is present laterally, the annular ligament will blend with radial collateral ligament. So it will blend with radial collateral ligament also with the fibrous capsule of the joint. So what will be the attachment of fibrous capsule of this superior radioulnar joint? So how you describe attachment of fibrous capsule for any synovial joint? So how it is attached along articulating surfaces or somewhere else? So that is the standard, you can say, description for any synovial joint, how the fibrous capsule is attached. So forget about this superior radioulnar joint. Take simple example of shoulder joint. Okay, so there is glenoid fossa, there is head of humerus. So these are two articulating surfaces, and as you all know, the articulating surfaces are smooth. They present smooth surfaces where they articulate. The rest of the bone, surrounding bone, is rough. Okay, so where is the exact attachment of fibrous capsule of shoulder joint? Fibrous capsule, other name is capsular ligament. Okay. So where it is attached? So usually fibrous capsule of any synovial joint is attached along peripheral margin of the articular surfaces. So remember this. This is standard description for any synovial joint, the attachment of fibrous capsule. There will be some exceptions. For example, in case of shoulder joint, the head of humerus, it provides attachment to fibrous capsule all along its peripheral margin except inferiorly where it extends near about by 1 centimeter. That's why there is laxity of capsule inferiorly and making it prone for inferior dislocation of the shoulder joint. So there will be few exceptions, but the standard description is along peripheral margin of the articulating surfaces. Matlab, if you are holding humerus, the smooth surface which you are showing that will articulate with the glenoid fossa, the peripheral margin of that smooth surface will be giving attachment to fibrous capsule of the shoulder joint. Similarly for superior radioulnar joint also. So peripheral margin of the head of radius will be giving attachment to this fibrous capsule of this joint, which will again blend with the fibrous capsule of the elbow joint. Okay, and also along the peripheral margin of the radial notch, and it will blend with annular ligament because it is part of the joint itself. Okay, then synovial membrane. Where is synovial membrane of any synovial joint? So capsule is along peripheral margin of the articulating surfaces. So where is synovial membrane then? It lines inner surface of the capsule. Okay, so it lines inner surface of the capsule. So in some places you will get extensions of synovial membrane, either communicating with the main synovial cavity or cut off from the main synovial cavity. If it is cut off from the main synovial cavity, joint cavity, then they are called as bursae. They are either developed as separate bursa or it is extension from the joint cavity. Okay, to avoid friction or to minimize friction of the adjacent tendons and all those structures related to joint. So these are two important ligaments, you can say, of the superior radioulnar joint. The lower part of annular ligament is called as quadrate membrane. Okay, so the lower part of annular ligament is called as quadrate membrane. One important thing related to this annular ligament, if you see the shape of annular ligament, it is cup shape. So upper part is wide, the diameter is more, whereas lower part has less diameter in case of adults. In case of children, the diameter of upper and lower part is nearly equal. And if you see head of radius of a child and head of radius of an adult, there is difference between head and neck, you can say proportion or the diameters. The head of radius in case of adults has more diameter as compared to neck. That's why it is called as neck, obviously the constriction that follows head in case of adults. Whereas in case of children, the head of radius and neck of radius, they have almost equal diameter. Okay. So there is one condition, clinical condition that we'll be discussing later. It is related to these two components. One is shape of annular ligament and second is the head and neck of radius in case of children and in case of adults. So ligaments we have already seen. So this is the annular ligament, and here you can see how it is blending with the radial collateral ligament laterally. It will also blend with the capsule of the superior radial nerve joint as well as of the elbow joint. Now coming to middle radial nerve joint. So it is syndesmosis type of fibrous joint. So there are two components, oblique cord and the interosseous membrane. So what is direction of interosseous membrane in case of middle tibiofibular joint? Yes, middle tibiofibular joint is also syndesmosis because there is this downwards and medially, laterally. So what is rule for, not rule you can say, but what is observation which is made with respect to preaxial bone and postaxial bone of the limb? There are two bones, tibia and fibula. Similarly here there is radius and ulna, correct? So it is always from postaxial to preaxial or preaxial to postaxial? Which is preaxial bone of lower limb? Yes? Tibia, yes, correct. And postaxial bone is fibula. In upper limb, which is preaxial bone, radius, and which is postaxial bone, ulna. So it is from preaxial to postaxial bone. So remember this, so you will not get confused for the attachment of interosseous membrane. So it is from tibia to fibula. So from tibia, it will be directed downwards towards fibula, downwards and laterally. And in case of forearm, what is the attachment? Downwards and medially towards interosseous border of the ulna. Okay. But if you see the lower part of this interosseous membrane, it presents an oval gap. Why there is oval gap? Because you will come across one artery, anterior interosseous artery. It is a branch of, yes, common interosseous artery, which is a branch of ulnar artery. So this anterior interosseous artery, it runs along anterior surface of this interosseous membrane, and after supplying anterior compartment, it enters posterior compartment by passing through this oval gap. Why it enters posterior compartment? Because the posterior interosseous artery which is there in posterior compartment is not sufficient to supply the lower part of the posterior compartment, or you can say distal part of the posterior compartment of the forearm. So this gap is for anterior interosseous vessels. What passes along this upper margin of the interosseous membrane? So usually there are vessels, nerves. What passes along upper border of the interosseous membrane of lower limb? Yes? Yes? Anterior tibial vessels. So anterior tibial artery is a branch of, हो गया lower limb, अभी कुछ ये नहीं, हाँ? Popliteal artery divides into its two terminal branches, anterior tibial artery and posterior tibial artery. Posterior tibial artery continues in posterior compartment of leg to supply the muscles, and anterior tibial artery enters anterior compartment by passing over the interosseous membrane. And what about nerve? Nerve passes over this interosseous membrane, or it pierces muscles. So which nerve enters anterior compartment? Entire common peroneal nerve? Deep peroneal nerve. So where is this common peroneal nerve related? Can you palpate common peroneal nerve? So nerve passes along neck of fibula, artery passes over interosseous membrane. Similarly, if you see the forearm region, the vessels which are passing above, which vessels are passing above? Yes? Those who are sitting in front, can you tell me which vessels are passing over the upper border of interosseous membrane? Why there is gap in the lower part of interosseous membrane? Yes? Which nerve passes through this gap? Or which artery? Which vessels? What passes? Anterior interosseous vessels. So these anterior interosseous vessels, how they enter anterior compartment? They passes over the, the ulnar artery which gives common interosseous artery, it will give the posterior interosseous and anterior interosseous. In leg, the anterior tibial vessels, they pass over the interosseous membrane, and in the forearm, the posterior interosseous vessel will pass over the upper border of the interosseous membrane, and they will enter posterior compartment of the forearm. So posterior interosseous vessels pass over the upper border of interosseous membrane, and the gap is for anterior interosseous vessels. Okay. And if you see deep branch of radial nerve which supplies posterior compartment of forearm, it passes or it enters posterior compartment of forearm by piercing one muscle, supinator. Okay. So deep branch, as it pierces supinator, it is called as posterior interosseous nerve. So posterior interosseous nerve, posterior interosseous vessels, they supply posterior compartment of the forearm. The artery or vessels passes over this interosseous membrane, whereas nerve pierces muscle. Here you can read oblique cord, and here you can see also this oblique cord where it is present. So if you see direction of fibers of oblique cord and direction of fibers of the interosseous membrane, it is different. Okay. So oblique cord is extending from the lateral aspect of the ulnar tuberosity to lower part of the radial tuberosity. And it is directed from ulnar to radius, towards radius. So it is basically said that it is remnant of degenerated part of the flexor pollicis longus muscle. Okay, so these two components are there for middle radioulnar joint. Main is the interosseous membrane and second is oblique cord, which is nothing but degenerated part of the flexor pollicis longus. So if you see this radius and ulna and three joints that we are discussing right now, so the three joints, mainly the superior and inferior radioulnar joints, they permit the movements which are called as supination and pronation. Okay. So the supination and pronation movements, they affect the arrangement of fibers, but the tightness of fibers which are present in the interosseous membrane. Okay. So if you see the position of the forearm, so if you place your forearm in mid-prone position like this, the interosseous membrane is stretched. And in extremes of supination and pronation, this is supination, this is pronation. So in extreme movements of the supination and pronation, it is relaxed. So this is about interosseous membrane, which is part of the syndesmosis. What are relations of middle radioulnar joint, which is having this interosseous membrane? So this is the ulnar artery, this is anterior part, this is posterior part, and here you can see how it gives common interosseous artery. This common interosseous artery further divides into anterior interosseous and posterior interosseous artery. So anterior interosseous artery runs along anterior surface of interosseous membrane, and then it passes through oval gap in the interosseous membrane in the lower part and it enters the posterior compartment. Okay. And the posterior interosseous artery arches over the upper border of the interosseous membrane and enters posterior compartment to supply the posterior group of muscles. Okay, or extensor group of the muscles of forearm. Inferior radioulnar joint. So what type of joint it is? Yes? Again pivot. Uniaxial pivot type of synovial joint. And what are the articulating surfaces we mentioned at the beginning of this lecture? Which bones form this joint? Head of ulna and ulnar notch, which is present along medial side of lower end of the radius. Okay. So that's how articulation is present. And there is one more component which is present. It is called as articular disc. It is called as articular disc. And you should know attachment of articular disc because it is related to the wrist joint. Okay. So this is uniaxial synovial joint. So if you see the lower end of radius and ulna, this is radius, this is ulna, and this is the articular disc. So this is ulnar notch of the radius, and this is the head of ulna which will be articulating here. So here you can see at the junction of head of radius and the prolongation, which is called as styloid process, this area in between these two provides attachment to apex of this articular disc. So it is triangular disc, fibrocartilaginous disc, triangular. The apex is attached in between styloid process and the head of ulna, and the base is attached to lower margin of the ulnar notch of the radius. Okay, so that's how it extends. And if you see it from below, it is like this. So this is lower articular surface of the radius, this is head of ulna and styloid process, and this is the styloid process of radius. So this is triangular articular disc which is attached in between head and styloid process, and laterally it is attached to the inferior margin of the ulnar notch of radius. So what happens because of the attachment, particular attachment of articular disc along ulna? the head of ulna is excluded from wrist joint. So whenever you describe wrist joint, it is always in between the radius and the proximal row of carpals. That's why it is called as, what is other name for wrist joint? Radiocarpal joint. Okay, so it is radiocarpal joint. Ulna is not part of wrist joint because of the presence of articular disc, which excludes it from the articulation with the carpals. Okay, and one more thing, can you see this prolongation of synovial membrane? Up. This is called as recessus sacciformis. So prolongation of synovial membrane of inferior radioulnar joint in between interosseous membrane and one small muscle which is present along lower 1/4 of the radius and ulna, which is named as pronator quadratus. So in between this interosseous membrane and pronator quadratus, this prolongation of synovial membrane extends above and it is called as recessus sacciformis. Now coming to important part, the supination and pronation movements. So whenever you describe movements occurring at elbow joint, describe only flexion and extension because it is hinge variety of synovial joint. And supination and pronation, these movements, they are occurring at radioulnar joint, to be specific, superior and inferior radioulnar joints. So can anyone define supination and pronation? All of you know about anatomical position. Okay. So how you will define this movement, supination and pronation? Yes, you can try. In anatomical position, what should be the position of forearm? So that you will call it as supination. And what should be the position of forearm when you call it as pronation? So if you are standing in anatomical position, which movement is this? If my palms are facing anteriorly, supination. And if I am holding my elbow like this is supination. So what should be the components for your definition of supination? Palm facing forwards in anatomical position or anteriorly, and if you are flexing elbow, then the palm facing superiorly. Okay. Similarly for pronation, the palm facing posteriorly in anatomical position and palm facing downwards in, I'm sorry, here it should be inferiorly. Okay, so supination and pronation inferiorly when the forearm is flexed. So when you are flexing your forearm, this movement is supination and this movement is pronation. Okay, so palm is facing downwards. If I am standing in anatomical position, then this movement is pronation and this movement is supination. So you remember these two positions so that you can define this supination and pronation. So usually you will get question, short answer question on these movements, supination, pronation. So what is expected? You are supposed to define these movements. You are supposed to mention joints at which these movements are occurring and the axis for the joint and which muscles are responsible for supination, which muscles are responsible for pronation. Okay. So this is an anatomical position. You can see palm facing anteriorly and palm facing posteriorly, and with flexed elbow, the palm not fist, palm facing above and palm facing below. Okay, supination, pronation. What I have mentioned here, with flexed elbow, the range of supination and pronation is limited to 140 to 150 degrees. Okay, you can try. With your flexed elbow, the supination, pronation movements, okay, they are limited to near about 140 to 150 degree. But if you extend your elbow, you can rotate it freely. Okay, so it is increased to 360 degrees. Why? Any explanation for this? Yes? Correct. The humeral head, which is rotating medially at the shoulder joint, it adds to extra degrees of pronation and supination that can be seen. Actually, it is rotation of humerus and rotation of scapula that is helping to increase the degrees of supination and pronation that is seen by the observer. Okay. So, supination, pronation in anatomical position and in flexed elbow and degree. So, that's how you can demonstrate the supination and pronation. So, how you will demonstrate supination and pronation of forearm and medial and lateral rotation of the shoulder joint? So, I can perform this movement and I am telling this is medial and lateral rotation of the shoulder joint. Am I wrong? So I can feel my humeral head is rotating within glenoid fossa. So it is medial rotation and this is lateral rotation. So with supination there is medial rotation of the humeral head. So this is medial rotation of the shoulder joint plus the pronation. And with supination there is lateral rotation at the shoulder joint and there is supination at the radio-ulnar joints. So to avoid confusion, whenever you demonstrate the medial and lateral rotation of shoulder joint, your elbow should be flexed. So if you move your this forearm like this is medial rotation, and if you move your forearm like this is lateral rotation. So to avoid confusion with the supination and pronation movement, this is just for depiction. So while demonstrating rotation of shoulder joint, you should follow the flexed elbow joint. Demonstrate, okay? So just for understanding, so here you can see in supination, in anatomical position, the palm is facing anteriorly and the two forearm bones which are present, they are present side by side. So they are parallel to each other, okay, radius and ulna. But if you see pronation, what happens in pronation? The upper part of radius lies parallel to ulna, whereas lower end of the radius, it rotates forwards and medially, okay. So this also depends whether your forearm is resting on a surface. So if my forearm is resting on a surface like this, okay, and I am rotating it, okay. So ulna is present at its position, only radius is rotating. If it is, if I'm with my flexed elbow and with my extended elbow. So there are differences in movements of ulna and radius while performing this supination and pronation movements at the radio-ulnar joint. In pronation, what happens? Yes, the lower end rotates forwards and medially. So what is effect on interosseous membrane? So with pronation, the interosseous membrane is spiralized. And with supination, when you are putting your radius in its original position, okay, with supination, the interosseous membrane is despiralized. Okay. So that's how the position of bones can be seen in this book picture. So here you can see supination. So this is radius, this is ulna. And with pronation, what is happening? The upper end of radius lies parallel, still parallel to the upper end of the ulna, whereas the lower end of the radius is moving forwards and medially. But with flexed elbow, it is said that there is slight movement of lower end of ulna also. Okay. So as radius is moving forwards and medially, there is backward and lateral movement of the lower end of the ulna. That will help in this pronation. And with supination, what happens? Again, it is positioned back to its the normal position which is seen in case of supination. So that's how the radius rotates at the superior and inferior radio-ulnar joints. So pronation and supination. So ring is formed by, so what is rotating? There are many pivot joints which are present. So we have already covered head, face, neck. So what is difference between pivot joint which is seen in the head, face, neck region and the pivot joint seen here? Any difference? Yes? Which is the pivot joint seen in head, face, neck? Huh? Atlanto-occipital, atlanto-axial, lateral atlanto-axial, median atlanto-axial, median atlanto-axial joint. So, where is the ring? The structure forming ring is axis, atlas. And where is the structure which is rotating? What is rotating? Dens is rotating. What is fixed? Dens is fixed and the ring is rotating, right? Correct? The atlas is rotating along with head region as occipital bones are present above. And in case of superior radio-ulnar joint, what is rotating? What is fixed? Radius. Yes, radius is rotating and the ring is fixed. Correct? So what is axis for supination and pronation? So when your forearm is in mid-air, the axis for supination and pronation passes from head of radius to the ulnar attachment of articular disc, and if you prolong it downwards, it passes through middle finger. Okay. And if your forearm is resting on a surface, then can you tell me axis? So I am performing this pronation and supination movement. So what is axis for this movement? Is it same? Is it passing through middle finger only? No. It is passing through little finger. Okay. So upper part of axis is fixed, head of radius. Then it will pass through, you can say approximately in between this radial and ulnar styloid process, but more appropriate will be the ulnar attachment of the articular disc, and lower down it will be passing through the little finger when your forearm is resting on a surface, and when it is mid-air, then it is passing through middle finger. So which position allows maximum range of supination and pronation? When it is resting on a surface or it is present in mid-air? Yes? When it is present or when it is rotating mid-air. So it is said that the less range of movement is seen when the axis is passing through little finger, and as the axis shifts towards middle finger and index finger, the range of movement of the supination and pronation increases. Okay? So that's the same thing. When it is resting on a surface, it passes through little finger, and when it is mid-air, then it is passing through the middle finger and the upper end of the radius. Now what are the muscles producing these movements? Supination and pronation. Yes. Supination. Which is the strong movement out of these two? Supination or pronation? What do you think? Supination. And why? So for why, you should know muscles producing movements. So which muscles produce supination? Biceps brachii and the muscle which is named as supinator. Supinator is supinator of forearm. Okay. But the main or prime supinator is biceps brachii. So how you will describe the supination produced by biceps brachii? Biceps brachii produces flexion at elbow joint and supination of forearm at radio-ulnar joint. So how you will demonstrate only supination produced by biceps brachii? Can you show this? Can you demonstrate only supination produced by biceps brachii? So you have to nullify other action. So other action is flexion. So you have to hold your elbow joint in semi-flexion, and then you perform the supination pronation. The supination which is produced in this position is mainly by biceps brachii, assisted by supinator muscle. Okay? So supinators are biceps brachii and supinator muscle. And which are the pronator muscles? Pronator quadratus assisted by pronator teres. Where is this quadratus? Quadratus is this muscle, small muscle which is present in lower 1/4 of the forearm region. Okay. So pronator quadratus assisted by pronator teres are the pronators of the forearm. So I hope this point is clear. If there is short note on supination and pronation, you can write the definition, the joints at which these movements are occurring, the muscles producing movements, axis for movements, and how the axis changes, the range of movement, how it is limited by flexion of elbow, and how it is increased by extending elbow with assistance from humeral head and scapular movement. So supination is the more powerful action because of the strong biceps brachii muscle. Okay. So whatever devices that screw introducing devices that are there, they are built considering this point, supination. So these movements, they require supination of forearm because this is more powerful than pronation. Okay, so this is supination, and this we have already seen how it is increased to 360 degrees. Blood supply is by adjoining vessels. So proximal and distal radio-ulnar joints will get branches from the radial and ulnar arteries. So as proximal, the superior radio-ulnar joint is in proximity with the elbow joint. There is one arterial circle surrounding this elbow joint. What is the name of this arterial circle? elbow anastomosis, which is formed by branches of various arteries coming from above brachial artery, profunda brachii, and below radian and ulnar artery. So it supplies superior radioulnar joint, and inferior radioulnar joint will be supplied by branches from radial and ulnar arteries because they are continuing below. Radial artery on radial side and ulnar artery on ulnar side of the forearm. Nerve supply, in the upper part there is musculocutaneous nerve, and medial and radial and ulnar nerves are there. And in lower part, as there are branches of this radial and median nerve, branch of median nerve is anterior interosseous nerve, branch of radial nerve is posterior interosseous nerve. So it will be supplying inferior joint. What is this condition called as? So this is the tendency of parents. What happens with this type of movement? So if one tries to lift child only by holding his wrist, his or her wrist, when the forearm is pronated or semi-pronated or mid-pronated, what happens? So there are chances of subluxation of head of radius from its osteofibrous ring. So this subluxation of the head of radius is called as nursemaid's elbow or pulled elbow. This is common condition which is seen in case of children below 6 years of age. Now what is justification for this? Can you tell me why it is common or why it is seen only in case of children, not in case of adults? So if you lift adult only by holding wrist, can you get pulled elbow in case of adults? No. Why? Why it is common in children? What about annular ligament? Yes? You can't hold adult, that is another point, but just for discussion, yes? Not developed. Smaller. They are of same, you can say, diameters or same size. Okay, not developed as seen in case of adults. This is one point, correct? What is other point? It is with respect to annular ligament, but you have to be very specific about annular ligament. So what is shape of annular ligament in case of adults? Cup shape. And what is shape in case of children? It is more cylindrical. So what happens if you have cylindrical annular ligament and head and neck of same size? And what will happen if there is annular, the cup-shaped annular ligament and head of radius is of more diameter as compared to neck of radius? So there are chances of subluxation in case of same diameter of head and neck of radius and cylindrical annular ligament. Okay, it is not cup-shaped. That's why it is easily pulled out of the osteofibrous ring. What is difference between dislocation and subluxation? Yes, dislocation means complete separation of articular surfaces, whereas subluxation is partial dislocation of the articulating surfaces. So forceful supination will bring the head of radius back into osteofibrous ring in case of this condition. Okay, so you remember this condition, there could be MCQ related to this condition and why this occurs in case of children only. Okay, so that is the explanation. Here you can see annular ligament in case of child and annular ligament in case of adult. How the shape is different and how it affects. Okay, coming to wrist joint. What type of joint it is? Yes? Gliding. What type of joint is wrist joint? Ellipsoid variety of synovial joint. Ellipsoid. It is ellipsoid variety of synovial joint. So headings will be same type, bones forming joint, ligaments, the arterial supply, nerve supply, relations, movements and muscles producing movements, and applied anatomy. So what type of joint it is? It is ellipsoid variety of synovial joint, and as it is biaxial, so there are wide range of movements that are occurring at this biaxial ellipsoid joint. Okay. So can you specify bones forming joint, wrist joint? The lower articular surface of radius and proximal row of carpals. Proximal row of carpals consists of scaphoid, lunate, triquetral. PC form is actually sesamoid bone, which is related to triquetral. So mainly these three bones: scaphoid, lunate, triquetral, and the inferior articular surface of the radius. So here you can see the cross section, the section passing through wrist joint. So this is lower end of radius, this is lower end of ulna, and this is the articular disc which is attached. And here you can see scaphoid, lunate, and triquetral. So lower end of the radius along with articular disc is the upper articulating surface, and the lower articulating surface is by scaphoid, lunate, and triquetral. Okay, so that's how ulna is excluded from wrist joint because of the attachment of articular disc. This we have already seen. Okay, so we have seen type of joint, we have seen the bones forming joint. Now coming to ligaments of the joint. So what are the ligaments of wrist joint? So attachment of fibrous capsule, synovial membrane, and then there are some radiocarpal ligaments, collateral ligaments. So what is attachment of fibrous capsule of wrist joint? Yes? What is attachment of fibrous capsule of wrist joint? Peripheral margin of articular surface of radius and the carpals. Yes? The thickening of the capsule laterally, medially and laterally, they form ulnar collateral ligament and radial collateral ligament. Okay, so capsule is thin anteriorly and posteriorly. It is thickened medially and laterally to form this collateral ligament. This thin capsule is again strengthened by these two ligaments, palmar radiocarpal ligament and dorsal radiocarpal ligament. So here you can see this is the ulnar collateral ligament, this is radial collateral ligament of the wrist joint, and this is the palmar radiocarpal ligament extending from lower end of the radius to the carpals, proximal row of the carpal. Similarly, there will be dorsal radiocarpal ligament strengthening posterior part of the fibrous capsule of the wrist joint. Okay. So this diagram again depicts this radial collateral ligament, ulnar collateral ligament, and also the palmar radiocarpal ligament, this one. What are relations of wrist joint? So there is flexor retinaculum, there is extensor retinaculum. Extensor retinaculum is related to, for that you should know attachments of these two retinacula. Flexor retinaculum is related to carpals. Extensor retinaculum extends up to radius also. So relations of wrist joint include anteriorly there will be nerves, tendons of muscles of the flexor compartment, and posteriorly there will be all tendons of extensor compartment of the forearm. Posteriorly, as you can see here, there are 6 osteofibrous compartments which are formed by the extensions of extensor retinaculum attached to the adjoining bones, radius and ulna. So, for example, it starts from here. The first compartment, lateral most, abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis, not longus here. Okay. This is the favorite, one of the favorite question for Viva. Whenever you appear for osteology Viva and you are holding radius bone, then this is one of the favorite question of examiners, Viva question. So first is extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus. Then there is extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Then there is extensor pollicis longus. Extensor indicis and digitorum is another compartment. Extensor digiti minimi related to articular disc. And then extensor carpi ulnaris. So these are posterior relations of the wrist joint. Which movements are possible at wrist joint? So it is biaxial joint. So which movements are possible at the wrist joint? Yes? Flexion, extension. Is it possible at wrist joint? Flexion and extension movements. So what is the other name for flexion? Can you compare it with ankle joint? Just for movements, not type of joint. Yes? Why it is called dorsiflexion? Why dorsiflexion? It is extension. Actually, it is extension. So why it is called dorsiflexion? Flexion, how you will describe flexion? Decrease in the angle between adjoining surfaces is flexion and increase in the angle is extension. But what is occurring at ankle joint? Whenever you move your ankle joint like this, there is decrease in angle. Similarly, whenever you move your ankle like this, there is again decrease in angle. So this becomes the plantar flexion, this becomes dorsiflexion. Similarly, at wrist joint, this movement is palmar flexion, this movement is dorsiflexion. Palmar flexion is actual flexion and dorsiflexion is actual extension at the wrist joint. So this is one movement. Other movement is, so this movement is, which movement is this? Which bone is present along this part? Ulna. And which bone is present here? Radius. So if you are moving your wrist towards ulna or towards medially in anatomical position, this is called as adduction. And away from body, abduction. So adduction is also called as ulnar deviation and abduction is also called as radial deviation. Okay? And combination of all movements, circumduction. So flexion, extension, adduction, abduction and circumduction. So if you see flexion, if I am flexing my wrist like this, the flexion is limited. And if I am flexing my wrist in this position, flexion is increased. Why is it so? Because it is assisted by flexion of mid-carpal joints. So flexion of mid-carpal joints assists in flexion of wrist joint to increase the degree of flexion. So perform this movement and perform this movement. Angle is increased with the flexion at mid-carpal joint. Similarly for abduction. Abduction, it is nearly 15 degrees. Okay. So abduction is 15 degrees, flexion is 85 degrees, near about approximately you can say extension is 60 degrees and the adduction is 45 degrees. So adduction and extension, they are occurring purely at the wrist joint, whereas the flexion and abduction, they are occurring in combination with the movements at the mid-carpal joints. Okay. So which movements are, which muscles are producing these movements? Have you done with the muscles of the forearm region, flexor and extensors? Then you can tell the actions of these muscles. So which muscles are responsible for this movement? Palmar flexion. Can you enumerate muscles responsible for palmar flexion? Which flexor? Flexor carpi radialis? Kya profundus? Why it is called digitorum then? Huh? It is for digits, mainly for digits. The muscles which are mainly controlling actions of digits, they are named as digitorum. Okay. Flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris. One muscle on radial side, one muscle on ulnar side, they produce palmar flexion assisted by, then you can say, tendons of flexor digitorum long, profundus and superficialis. But mainly carpi ulnaris and carpi radialis. Similarly, extension, which muscles are producing extension? Which carpi radialis longus? Extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and extensor carpi ulnaris assisted by extensor digitorum and extensor indicis. This movement, adduction or ulnar deviation, is produced by one muscle from flexor compartment, one muscle from extensor compartment. Similarly, radial deviation, two muscles from extensor compartment, one muscle from flexor compartment. Which muscles produce adduction or ulnar deviation? Flexor carpi ulnaris and extensor carpi ulnaris. Which muscles produce radial deviation or abduction? Flexor carpi radialis and extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis. Okay. So remember muscles producing movements, flexion, extension or palmar flexion, dorsiflexion, the ulnar deviation or adduction and radial deviation or abduction of the wrist joint. So these are the muscles. Blood supply is by carpal branches coming from radial and ulnar artery forming this palmar and dorsal carpal arches. The nerve supply is by the anterior interosseous nerve and posterior interosseous nerves. Okay. Do you know what is Colles fracture? And Smith's fracture. Colles and Smith's. Colles fracture is when you fall on outstretched hand like this. So when you support your body weight and try to prevent fall on outstretched hand, usually the lower end of radius fractures in such a way that the distal part or distal fragment of the radius will move upwards, backwards and laterally. So if you see the position of forearm, the lower part of forearm, it resembles a dinner fork. So it is called as dinner fork deformity. Colles fracture presents with dinner fork deformity because of the particular position of the distal fragment of the fracture segment, you can say, upwards, backwards and laterally. So this is presenting with dinner fork deformity, the Colles fracture. Okay. So here you can see distal fractured segment which is deviated laterally, upwards and backwards. So this is Colles fracture. Smith's fracture on the other hand is like this. When fall is like this. When it is on outstretched hand, then it is Colles fracture. When it is like this, then it is Smith's fracture. So what happens with the distal fragment? It moves ventrally or anteriorly. So it is called as Smith's fracture. So these are fractures of radius. As they are related to wrist joint, usually we describe these two fractures with respect to the wrist joint. One more condition, the anterior dislocation of lunate is also common with the injury which involves fall on outstretched hand. Because of the particular positioning of the lunate, we will be studying today how lunate is placed in between the other carpals. So because of its articular surfaces and shape, it is more prone for anterior dislocation. Fracture of scaphoid is another condition. Again with the outstretched hand fall. So usually the waist of scaphoid is fractured as it is one of the long, you can say, carpal which is present in the proximal row of the carpals, and there is something called as avascular necrosis of scaphoid which is seen because the segment which necroses is supplied by artery which is usually cut off during this fracture and it is deprived of its blood supply. That's why there is avascular necrosis of the scaphoid that occurs. There is one more bone in body which presents with avascular necrosis. Which part of femur? Head of femur. The arteries pass along neck. Whenever there is fracture of neck, there will be avascular necrosis of head of femur. Okay, in short, not much to discuss about first carpometacarpal joint, but in living anatomy, you will be asked to demonstrate movements of thumb. Okay, movements of thumb means movements which are occurring at first carpometacarpal joint. So type of joint, what type of joint it is? Saddle variety of synovial joint because of the articular surfaces, and it has great range of movement because of the particular positioning of the first metacarpal. If you see articulated hand, the first metacarpal is rotated by 90 degrees. The first metacarpal is rotated by 90 degrees medially. So when you see articulated hand, each metacarpal has the palmar surface and dorsal surface. But if you see first metacarpal, it has medial surface and lateral surface. So why there is medial and lateral surface? Because of the 90 degrees medial rotation of the first metacarpal, and that's why there is free range of movement at first carpometacarpal joint. Can anyone name the bones forming first carpometacarpal joint? Which bones forms this first carpometacarpal joint? Trapezium and first metacarpal. So the distal surface of the trapezium and the base of first metacarpal will form this first carpometacarpal joint. The ligaments are capsular ligament as we discussed along peripheral margin. There will be synovial membrane. There is lateral ligament as seen in this picture. Okay, there is dorsal ligament and palmar ligament to strengthen the anterior and posterior part of the capsule. The movements. So which movements are possible at this first carpometacarpal joint? So there is flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, conjunct medial rotation, conjunct lateral rotation, apposition, reposition, and some degree of circumduction. So how you will demonstrate these movements? Flexion and extension of the thumb at the first carpometacarpal joint, it occurs parallel to the plane surface. So if you are keeping your palm like this, hand like this, with palm facing superiorly. So this movement is flexion, this movement is extension. It is depicted in picture also. So here you can see this is flexion, this is extension. The movement away from rest of the palm is abduction. It is perpendicular to the plane of palm. So this is abduction, this is adduction. Okay, adduction, abduction. This is flexion, extension. Parallel to the plane of the palm and perpendicular to the plane of the palm. So flexion, extension, adduction, abduction. What is conjunct medial and lateral rotation? Any idea about conjunct rotation? Have you seen this type of rotation somewhere, anywhere in body? Yes. Any joint that has conjunct rotation? Knee joint, yes. There is adjunct rotation also. What is difference between conjunct and adjunct rotation? Is there any difference? सिर्फ नाम ही अलग है, बाकी सेम ही. Yes. Conjunct rotation means it occurs as a part of some other movement. Okay. Adjunct rotation is produced actively by contraction of muscles. So adjunct medial and lateral rotation at knee joint is only possible when your foot is off the ground. When foot is off the ground, the rotation that is occurring is adjunct medial and lateral rotation. When foot is on the ground, you are locking and unlocking your knee joint. So along with locking and unlocking, the movement which is occurring by rotation is called as conjunct medial and lateral rotation. Similarly, conjunct medial and lateral rotation of the thumb occurs with flexion and extension. So conjunct medial rotation occurs with flexion and conjunct lateral rotation occurs with extension of the thumb at first carpo-metacarpal joint. What is apposition and reposition? When your pulp of finger touches pulp of other fingers, this is apposition. Okay, this is apposition. And from this position, you are keeping your thumb in, again, normal position. This is reposition. So apposition and this is reposition. Okay. So these are main movements which are occurring at the first carpo-metacarpal joint. And circumduction will be combination of all these movements, will be circumduction. So there are many muscles which are responsible for these movements. As you can see, there are eminences present along this palm region, mainly the thenar eminence, muscles of the thenar eminence, the tendons which are passing posteriorly, anteriorly are responsible for these movements. So this is abduction, this is adduction, this is extension, this is flexion, this is apposition and this is reposition. Okay, and combination is circumduction. So muscles. So once you finish with the thenar muscles and muscles which are passing anterior and posterior to the thumb, the two phalanges of thumb and the first metacarpal, you will come to know how they act. Okay. So flexion is produced by flexor pollicis brevis, opponens pollicis, which are muscles of the thenar eminence, assisted by flexor pollicis longus. Brevis means attached to proximal phalanx. Longus is attached to distal phalanx. Okay, whenever you come across these muscles, brevis and longus, longus is to distal phalanx and brevis is attached to proximal phalanx. Extension is produced by abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, assisted by extensor pollicis longus. For thumb, there is separate adductor, okay, which is called as adductor pollicis. If you see other fingers, for rest of the fingers, the adduction is produced by palmar interossei. The abduction is produced by dorsal interossei. But for thumb, adduction is produced by adductor pollicis muscle. Okay. Abduction is produced by abductor pollicis longus and brevis. And apposition is initiated by abductor pollicis longus and brevis and it is maintained by. Apposition involves flexion, abduction and flexion. That's why it is initiated by abductor muscles and maintained by flexor muscles. Correct? So you have to think along these grounds so that you can demonstrate the movements and you can explain the muscles which are producing these movements. Blood supplies by branches of radial artery and nerve supplies by branches of median nerve for this first carpo-metacarpal joint. So that's all about this lecture. The radioulnar joints, wrist joint and first carpo-metacarpal joint. Most of it is related to living anatomy. So you have to demonstrate movements of wrist joint, thumb at the first carpo-metacarpal joint. Okay, any doubt?